when I look out in the world, I see the most unhealthy feminine is in a man's body, not in a woman's body. And so if we're wanting more embodied leadership, and we're wanting more people who are not just fluctuating at the mind, that doesn't mean the mind goes away, it just means it's there, utilized as a tool, then what that requires is a journey into the mystery of the body, which can be a deep mystery that's often disconnected because of so many times in our life when we were told we can't feel.
All right, Rising Man family, I've got Aaron Kleinerman joining me today, all the way from Costa Rica. How are you feeling today, bro?
I'm good. I just put my feet down in this beautiful country last night and just prepping for a men's retreat starting up tomorrow.
That's awesome, man. I am a little bit envious right now. You look very comfortable. Today, it's a very cold, gray, overcast Santa Cruz day. And I'm like, man, Costa Rica sounds pretty good right now. What am I doing wrong?
It's pretty good. I live mainly in Bali these days, and I've been gone from the tropics for the past 2 months. So I'm like, oh, this feels very homely.
Well, thanks for joining us, man. I know how it can be getting ready to build up to a big retreat. I know you got, I think you said 20 men coming out there with you this weekend. That's awesome. Really excited to hear a little bit more about that. I'm going to jump right into it, man, because you seem like a guy who's ready to go. I always ask this question of my guests, and that is, what does it mean to be a man?
Especially in today's world, what does it mean to be a man? For me, being a man is being very certain, clear, confident, as well as the capacity of my own receptivity. I feel like the shoes to which men wear in today's world has changed a lot from the, let's say, a man that was being an apprentice with his father, learning how to, weld and do things like that 100+ years ago, to a man now of being online more and interacting in a very different way. And I find, for me, what it really means to be a man is to have a balance of both time with the earth, where I'm really connecting with nature, connecting to that part of me that is beyond just my mind and into my body, as well as a part of me that likes to get shit done and likes to, be productive. So to be a man in today's world is to know, inside of me, the power of my seed, the power of my creativity, as well as my capacity to know death. I think we could take it right there. I think a man has to know death in order to be really a man.
Okay, I want to pick this one apart. You have some nice. First, curiosity. I love that you said that it's different in the modern world compared to what it used to be. And I think that's kind of obvious, right? The modern world is so much different than it was even for just our father's generation, right? But certainly multiple generations back, it's like a completely different planet that we're living on and inhabiting. But I'm interested more in what's the same. What hasn't changed over the course of time, in your opinion, for what it means to be a man?
Well, what I feel like hasn't changed is there's still, I feel, inside of men a longing to be on purpose. And just think that what that purpose is has changed and shifted. Like I was just having a lunch meeting with the guy I'm teaching this retreat with, and we were talking about some guys in our field and conversations. He was saying a guy he knows said, I don't know what my purpose is. And to me, when a man doesn't know what his purpose is, it's almost like, well, who the fuck are you? And that's challenging because we want to know what our purpose is. We want to be clear. We want to be direct. We want to know what that is. And I think the man from 100 years ago could identify more in the purpose of, I'm a family man, I'm raising my children, I'm working hard, I'm getting things done, and I'm providing, I'm being the provider. And I think that is still alive. I think there's a lot of validity in being a provider for family, but I think the way in which that providing is happening has shifted. And there's almost this conversation where people who are just providers, like, is that enough? And is that enough? Like I look at, I come from a maritime military background, and a lot of the guys I went to school with and guys in that world, like their general identification as a man is the provider for their family. So I think that piece, in answer to your question, is something that has stayed consistently true. It's just the way in which that providing is happening is, of course, changing with our times.
it's like the value of that has gotten knocked down the ladder as we've created a more complex society. Like you said, however many generations you have to go back, simply providing and protecting your family was not just enough, it was noble, right? It was what a man is supposed to do. And nowadays there's plenty of men who are doing that at a baseline level. We could get into the nuances of how well they're doing that, but as far as putting food on the table and sending their kids to school and giving their families opportunity to thrive and grow, there's a lot of men who are doing that but feel exactly what you described, that sense of inadequacy, it's not enoughness. And I think that's just a symptom of an increasingly more complex society that we've subscribed to that tells us you got to be shooting for more. You got to be shooting for more than just that. And I work with a lot of fathers and dads too, and how many of them feel that purposelessness. And I'm like, man, just turn around and look behind you. At your kids right there. All you need to know as far as purpose is right there. And I think I don't know, maybe you feel similarly that a lot of guys are trying to complicate this idea of purpose and making it more than what it needs to be.
Yeah, no, I feel that quite strongly. I think that a man that can be a good provider and be a good, family man and create safety and security, there's something deeply powerful about that. I'm not a father. I have many friends in my life who are fathers. And, I run into this funny thing, and I'm curious what you think. Some of the guys I know who are just family men, and like they work on the land and they have their family and they're doing their thing in their own beautiful way. I've actually sometimes find they're more spiritual than the guys who are like more in the spiritual circles of things. And I navigate a lot in kind of spiritual circles, but I also have a lot of friends from my other life that, they work out at sea or they work with the military and they just do their 9 to 5. And I wouldn't say all of them are like fully really fulfilled, but those that are, there's something really beautiful about that. And I think sometimes people take that away. It's like with all of this rising of consciousness, sometimes the family man is almost forgotten, but there's a real gift in just doing that and being the provider. And if that's somebody's soul journey, then my hat's off to that. Sometimes people don't want more, and they don't need to want more either. I think there might be a time if someone's hitting their head against the same brick wall and they realize that they need to change. But if they're generally content inside and they feel fulfilled, then hats off to them. They don't need to go to some retreat to figure that out,
Well, I've got an example that it's metaphorical in nature that I think will convey how I feel about this. So yeah. I participate in traditional ceremony in the Native American church. It's been a beautiful connection spiritually for me. I speak about it a lot here on the podcast. People who know me intimately know it's a huge part of my life. And my wife, myself, my kids have been involved in that for the past 6 years. And in that tradition, there's a legacy, there's a lineage of passing on the responsibilities to carry what they call the fireplace of the ceremonial space. So basically, the responsibility to be a ceremonial leader in a community is something that is gifted and passed on. And in the best case scenario, it's done in a very deliberate manner, a very calculated manner. It's something that generally takes many years for somebody to prepare for and earn the right and the respect and the prestige to carry that on. Now, one of the things that you see, just because we're all humans and it's inevitable in any community, is ambition that shows up. And you see people, a lot of times young people, who want that fireplace, who want the prestige of that role, of that responsibility. And I've come to really respect and appreciate and honor the ones who are given that opportunity and almost reject it at first because they have so much respect and honor for what it means to sit in that role, to carry that responsibility. And the rejection is connected to I have so much respect for what it means to carry that responsibility that I don't want it. I don't desire it. I don't have ambition to sit in that position, but I will if that's what's calling me, if that's what the people need, if this is in the best interest of my people, of my family, of my community, fill in the blank, I will take on that role. And to me, that's the reason I share that is because to me it's such a pure example, and it's a really great litmus test to see who's ready for responsibility. To me, as somebody who doesn't desire it but is willing to say yes anyway, And I think that's where real purpose shows up. You know, if I'm pursuing purpose because of there's a significance at the other end of the equation for me, that's something that I need to look at. I need to check myself in, and that's why having community is so essential. A lot of these people who are out there in the world who are lone wolfing it, lone dogging it, that pursuit of significance can cloud the greater connection to purpose, in my opinion, sometimes.
Yeah, and I love you say that, because one of the things I hear in that is there's sometimes an ego identification to the role. And the moment the ego gets identified, well, I want to be seen in this way as the the firekeeper, as a ceremonialist, so that a part of my identification gets validated. And there's a big piece of that in the culture as a male body on this planet, because we grow up and we get validated by the hat and the role and the significance that all of these different positions make. And I've been caught up in that myself. And one of the biggest gifts I found is when I can actually dissolve my desire to be anything and actually surrender into how does my soul want to show up without doing something because it's validating. Like, I've been in this game of doing retreats and workshops and speaking for over 15 years. And, 10 years or 15 years ago, like, there was a lot more ego identification to wanting to be the one who's teaching, and I am the guru, and, all the other stuff that comes with that. And, one of the places I really like to support in, live retreats like the one I'm starting tomorrow is, what does it look like when male bodies can share in power? And what can that dynamic feel like? And yeah, I'm the one kind of, you could say, navigating the ship and kind of bringing in different people, but I'm, to the best of my ability, wanting to create a space where they can feel that there's different leaders who are bringing this piece in, and this piece is coming in. Yeah, we need some organizational framework, but the more that every individual has their genius that gets to be shared, then they're doing that not because they want to be validated by who they are, but doing it because that's generally their unique soul's gift that's been offered on this planet. And that's it turns me on. That's where this conversation gets sexy.
Yes. And that's where the word patience comes in for me, because I know I started sitting in men's circles when I was 20 years old. I'm 34 today. And for the first 3 or 4 years, it was literally just males sitting in circle together. I didn't really get busy until I was 25. And I sat in a men's circle with guys who've been doing it for a long time. And I know that if I look back to where I was when I was 25 and when I first started coaching and leading men's circles when I was in my late 20s, there was definitely more ego attached to it. I can definitely own the significance factor, the need that was not yet met. That third stage in Maslow's hierarchy of needs to secure my belonging and my place within the tribe, within the community, was so much louder then. And of course, I didn't want to speak to it, because who wants to expose their ego when they're in leadership? But exactly what you described there, I can feel the difference now. Now that I've been putting in my reps, now that I've been done this for longer, there's a much greater ratio in favor of, I just want to be here to be of service. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't necessarily want to or need to be the guy leading the charge, but I will if I'm the right guy. If I'm the right guy for the job, then I'll do it. I'll do it for as long as I need to, but along the way, I'm going to empower others who can step into that role, who can serve in that capacity if that's what their soul's calling is. And that's what I hear in what you're describing too, is like, I'm just happy to be here and be of service. That's plenty for me.
Yeah. And that place of leadership, I feel like, is so relevant. The background I came in from maritime military, like, I've always been a very natural born leader. And that exact place kind of came in with what you're saying. Like, the framework of like this particular retreat, I was looking for something that was going to meet my edges more and meet the uncomfortable places inside me. And I pulled from a couple of different like retreats and different things and different teachers and mentors. And then I was partly like, all right, well, who else is doing this? Who else is like taking facilitators and people who are doing this work and taking them to the next level? And I looked around and I was like, okay, I guess that's me. Like, that was kind of like, I remember, when this retreat was first kind of birthed, a mentor of mine had about 50 guys who were all on this path for, many years, and we came together in Prague. And at the end of it, it was conversation of like, who's going to lead this? Who's going to keep doing this? And I was like, well, I want to. And I kind of figured other guys would be, and it's just kind of all dwindled away. Like there's one or two other guys who've kind of done some things. And I get everyone has their own place. But what I like about that is like I'm doing this because I love supporting, especially guys who are facilitators, who are holding men's circles. Like, where's their next edge? Where's their next place of finding the uncomfortable shadows inside? And that's what I long for. So I'm like, I'm going to create that. So I end up having, usually 60-70% of the guys that come in for this, it's a little bit smaller groups of guys that are doing big things in their community. And that for me is like, I'm not just impacting that person. I'm impacting, their whole tribe that sits behind them as well.
Sure, man. I love that. All I can do is nod my head because I'm in complete resonance with you. I've had a very similar experience myself. I'd say it's really landed for me in the past couple of years, if I'm being truthful, that I genuinely feel that. For a while, I could speak to that because that's underneath layers of ego. That's what my heart was telling me all along. But really in the past couple of years, even more so just this past year, it's that much more true and that much more authentic. So I deeply resonate with what you're saying, and I actually want to shift over into this conversation of embodiment. Before we started recording, I told you how much I get triggered by words like embodiment and consciousness just getting haphazardly thrown around in the space and saturated. So let's first define embodiment. What is embodiment? When you use that word, what do you describe it?
It means to be inside the body, to be inside this human flesh suit. And one of the reasons that I feel like embodiment is becoming more of a conversational topic is that we're realizing on a certain level that our mind is only going to take us so far. The analogy I love to look at is I'm a ship's captain by trade, so I've spent a lot of time navigating big ships around the world. And one of the ships I worked on for a while was a cruise ship out in Hawaii. And when we were on the cruise ship, you had a navigator and a co-navigator up on the bridge. And the co-navigator's job was assimilating all of the different information, the wind, the weather, the tides, the next port of call, and then essentially, kind of feeding that to the navigator, who then is making the decision of, left 20 or, slow down or, this is happening. I find for a lot of people, the mind is the navigator and the heart is the co-navigator. Where the shift happens is where the mind can just do its job as the assimilating information machine that it is, and then feed that information through the neural pathways, as beautiful science has showed us, that literally opens up the heart more. So for me, embodiment is a journey out of the mind into the heart, but it's also including the emotional body and our sex center. So these four centers, we have our mind, we have our heart, we have our emotions, we have our sex. If the information at the sex center and the emotions can start to feed that to the heart, and the mind can feed that to the heart, then what happens at the end is a more integrated individual who's connected to the heart, which in my perspective is the closest representation to the soul. So if I want to be more embodied and connected to my soul's purpose, then I need to be connected to my heart. But if my mind is always making the decisions, then my heart's just following it along the way. So to shift that, to dive into the mystery of the body, requires a willingness. It requires a capacity to meet some of the uncomfortable, you could say a lot of the anger and shame and guilt and kind of the nasty stuff that's in like the lower chakras that's like gets pushed away at a young age. That needs to be addressed to be a more embodied man. And that's what I found in my own journey, when I didn't want to confront those things. I could understand something intellectually, but the cells of my body was still dictating something else. And I think that's what people run into a lot, is we understand all the concepts, but then we're still making the same decisions.
Yeah, that's why I tell people that you can't just listen to the podcast. You can't just read the books. You got to put your body in circumstances where it can gather that experiential wisdom of actually being in the storm, not just hearing about it or reading about it in the newspaper. When you were talking about that and you're talking about all the intellect, I had this flashback to high school. I went to a private Catholic high school back in northern New Jersey, very competitive school. I was smart. I was in all of the honors classes, but I wasn't the smartest. Definitely not by far. You know, there was kids way more intelligent than I was. Kids who got perfect SAT scores and 5s on their AP tests. But I remember that these kids were I realized they were just brains walking around in a completely empty body, because they would have nervous breakdowns. They'd have nervous breakdowns during finals week. They would be confronted or bullied, or have somebody, you know, start physically pushing them around a little bit, and they would completely disintegrate. And brain power can only get you so far, and it revealed itself. Here we were, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. But by the time that those 16, 17, 18-year-old kids got to college, and now we're in our early 20s, and now we have to navigate the world completely unprepared. My college experience, I went to school at a place called Ithaca College, which is right next to Cornell, which is an Ivy League school. The number of suicides that happened at Cornell, just on the other side of the hill of where we were, because these brains were so overwhelmed and couldn't integrate what was happening in their bodies, that the only way out they saw was ejecting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And the reason I bring that up is because when you were talking about the intellect, we put such a high social value on intellect. Even our educational system is completely modeled around intellectual information. It seems like it's changing a little bit now. Even the alternative schooling is very much more it's encouraging kids to be a little bit more in their bodies. They're doing meditation. They're doing more. They're bringing physical education back to the curriculum, but there's a gap. It's like a whole generation forgot how to be in their bodies, and unless we address that, it's going to pass itself on to our kids.
For sure. Yeah, and you know, I think the number one issue with this is that we're generally in a culture and society that values logic, reason, and understanding more than intuition, feeling, and receptivity. And, you know, the intuition, feeling, and receptivity, in my perspective, is a bit more of feminine qualities. And when I say feminine, I'm just meaning like I have feminine qualities, you have feminine qualities, I'm in a male body, you're in a male body. But to be more integrated and whole means that those more feminine qualities are more well matured and developed, you know. And when I look at the conversation of embodiment as it relates to the feminine, when I look out in the world, I see the most unhealthy feminine is in a man's body, not in a woman's body. And so if we're wanting more embodied leadership, and we're wanting more people who are not just fluctuating at the mind, that doesn't mean the mind goes away, it just means it's there, utilized as a tool, then what that requires is a journey into the mystery of the body, which can be a deep mystery that's often disconnected because of so many times in our life when we were told we can't feel, and, you know, put on your happy face, you know, big boys don't cry, all the different terminology and verbology that's, you know, kind of taken on through the years, that then it's like, okay, if I'm going to do society, I'm supposed to just do it by getting good grades, by being smart, by being academic, and that's how I live. I live in the brain. And I think we as a culture, as a society, and as male bodies realize that there's a new course being charted, and that to me is where this gets exciting, you know.
100%, I agree. And to me, when I think of embodiment, it's the calm during the storm, the calm within the storm, right? I think of some of these archetypal scenes from movies where you see a man and it's just like downpouring and lightning and thunder striking, and you just see this calm resolve over someone's body. That's the image that I think of when I imagine myself in the storms of daily life. Adversity, challenge, those inevitabilities that, I don't know about you, I wasn't really prepared for as a child. Nobody really told me about some of those challenges that were waiting for me on the other side of the threshold, going from boyhood into manhood. And so when we talk about embodiment, I would have loved to be in more uncomfortable situations as a kid, and to also be supported in that discomfort in a different way. I think the parents did the best they could, but I actually lived a very safe, a very secure, a very calculated and predictable childhood. Life still gave me adversity. You know, I almost lost my mom when I was 9 years old. I almost died when I was 5 years old. There's some things that you just can't avoid, no matter how quote unquote privileged you are. But I know my generation and a lot of my contemporaries, they lived a very safe life. And then it was
Mhm.
all of a sudden, okay, good luck now, because here comes the storm. Good luck, and duck and cover.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that creates a lot of the shame phenomena that we have of, guys with beards and who are disconnected from their feelings and feel emotionally at the maturity level of a child because we haven't really learned how to be in the discomfort of life and challenge. And
Yeah.
that's where embodiment comes in, right? Throw your body at it and teach your body how to be in it.
And, I think that's also one of the reasons that, especially in COVID times, male suicide rates have skyrocketed because there is so much feeling that's happening. And there's also this like fear of, well, what happens when my body dies? So what if I could meet that fear, not just at an intellectual basis, but at an embodied level that lets me breathe, lets me move, lets me sound, lets me feel what it feels like to be in this male body. The reflection kind of space I want to speak to that is like, often I see men who can have these very chaotic and crazy, woman on the outside, a partner, a woman that's very crazy and wild, and how do I deal with that? It's like, I've learned in myself, having very strong, dynamic, animated partners, that they're really just a reflection of anything that I haven't learned to love and appreciate inside myself. So if I'm judging and blaming their crazy embodiment, I realized that I was just judging and blaming it because I didn't own the crazy bitch that was inside of me.
Sure, man. And I think the same is true for a lot of things. As soon as we're triggered by something, as soon as we see ourselves judging something, it's usually just because it's a projection of the inside, right? That we don't want to look at or don't feel comfortable looking at. But that's great. I'm glad that you made that connection. This idea of embodiment and being able to be, when I think of embodiment, I think of a lot of the martial arts analogies. I think of these old masters and senseis that just have to walk in the room and command attention and respect just because of the presence that they have. When I think of ultimate embodiment and mastery of the body, it's having that. And to me, it's years and years of putting ourselves through the rigors and challenges to basically, you're only as prepared for the future as what you've already been through in the past. That's the way I look at it. And so one of those places that I see a lot of men that, in my opinion, are wildly unprepared for, because I was one of them, is relationship, committed relationship specifically, and even just relationship in general, whether we're talking about casual dating or we're talking about long-term committed partnership. So what's the connection between embodiment and relationship in the way that most men want to show up, but sometimes have a hard time figuring out how to do that?
Well, what I've found from my own journey is that the more I've become, embodied in my own feelings, my own senses, my own being, then it's allowed me to show up in relationship with more congruency and more of an overflow. And rather than what I see happen in relationship is a lot of codependency, where often a man is projecting all of his own feminine characteristics onto the woman, which can be beautiful, because it's amazing to love the goddess, and the woman's body and being is gorgeous, and I love adoring the goddess. But when I didn't know the goddess here, when I didn't know the goddess inside me, and I wasn't embodied with her, then the relationship tended to be a lot more rocky. And I think that the most important piece around embodiment is the emotional body. Now, in my last partner, who I run Embodied Awakening Academy with, we run a tantra school, when we first got together, it was amazing. I had never actually, I remember the first times that there was any disagreements or fights between us. She literally would take herself out of the room. She'd go move her emotional body, kill, kick and scream, whatever she needed to do, because she knew her session was in school, like it was time to do her inner work. And then she'd come back into conversation, into very clear communication. And I was like, whoa, I've heard of women doing this, but I've never actually seen it in action in relationship. And so what did that do? My own feminine had a reflection of what it meant to have a healthy emotional body, rather than what I was used to is when the external feminine got triggered, I would be like, all right, I'm ready for war, my guards are up, I'm ready to hit all the, what do I need, how do I protect myself here? And instead, she wasn't perfect at it, no one's ever perfect, but in general, this was a situation. And what it did is it created the space for my own being to know what to do with my emotional body when things came up. So then when we did come back together, there was clear, conscious communication. We weren't relying upon each other to be our coach, to be our counselor. We were meeting ourselves in our own inner union, our own masculine, feminine, dancing together. And then as a result of us being strong in our own inner union, when we would come together in unionship, it was like we got to have this other whole dimension to the relationship. I kind of call it like a three-way with God, not a religious God, but a grand design that was unifying and coming together for our relating. And that to me is the essential piece of embodiment in relationship. Both people have to have, and whether it's masculine, man, woman, whatever pronoun you want to use, both individuals have to have a healthy relationship with their emotional body in order to have a healthy relationship in the bedroom as well as out of the bedroom with communication.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. I think if I had to narrow it down to one area that makes it difficult for most men to be in a relationship, it's connection to their emotions and also knowing what to do with them. Mm-hmm. Where is it appropriate for me to exercise and explore and express my emotions? When is it time for me to be in command of my emotions and redirect that energy towards something else? Mm-hmm. And to have that level of discernment requires first a deeper exploration into those emotions. And the only places I've really seen full, free, and safe exploration of emotions for men is in spaces with other men, at least first, at least initially. Mm-hmm. And I won't go too deep into detail, but I've been in rooms with 250 guys who are from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of age demographics, and the lights go out and we're led into an emotional experiencing exercise, and all of a sudden within 5 minutes it looks like a psych ward, like literally, and not to satirize that, but literally it's like the tears, the sobbing, the kicking, screaming, yelling. It's almost like you're in one of those scenes from a horror movie, because it's so unusual. At least it was for me at the time. The first time I witnessed this, I'll never forget, back in 2015. And to witness men just doing what naturally their body is asking them to do, whatever that is. Guys were hitting each other, right? Obviously in a safe context, but like making physical contact with each other and like being held, being hugged, like screaming on the ground. It was incredible. And I know that that's still a highly unique experience for most men to claim on the resume. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. What do you think it looks like for men? Let's imagine that guys are hearing this and they're like, oh my God, that sounds really intense and overwhelming, but also something I feel like I need more of. What's a good entry point to begin that emotional exploration in a healthy way?
I get this question actually a lot. I get a lot of messages from women who are like, my husband's not embodied, he's doing this, he's running the same problems, what do I do? How do I start? Where does this begin? Yeah. So I can appreciate it. I mean, really what it takes is a man's willingness more than anything. Like, the man has to recognize, okay, there's some way of being, there's something that I'm continually doing that's just not working. And the willingness starts with getting vulnerable with the self. Like, I remember one of the first times I cried, cried for no reason, and just cried and actually got real with the emotions that were inside of me. And I could feel, even in those tears, I was like, oh my God, who's somebody looking at me? Like, oh, I gotta wash away the tears, and it was like, oh no, I can actually just be with that. And it's a journey, not a destination. And I think for any man who's just beginning to show up in this way, find a local men's circle, find a place where you can begin to just share under the surface of what's alive. Like when I'm living in Bali, I always host weekly men's circles, and I love when new guys come and they're like, I've never sat around a group of men before, and they, at the end of it, and I actually do these circles called embodied men's circles, so I invite like a deeper expression, and some guys come once and they're like, I like what you're doing here. I might be ready for it in about 5 years, but give me a little bit, because this is a little intense. I'm like, fair enough, bro. Like, because, you know, and what you're sharing, being in a room with like that many people, that many men expressing, there's a lot that's there. And if you think about all the emotion and the energy that's been suppressed and that's been pushed down, like whatever is suppressed on the inside gets expressed on the outside, which is usually where men are judging, ridiculing, and shaming the chaotic, crazy, what they call the feminine on the outside. So for a man to just start to own that there might be some things inside that he, you know, doesn't know how to work with and be with. And, you know, honestly, the book I just wrote that's coming out shortly, one of my inspirations in this was like, I felt like I wanted to speak to that man that's like, he's not quite even at that willingness point. Like he may have heard about a concept before, like even the fact in being able to pick up a book called The Embodied Man, I know is going to shift to like, there's a willingness right there. Sure. But there's so many guys, because of the society and the alpha that we've grown up in, for many people, that it's like there's almost a shame with admitting that something needs to shift, and like there's a shame of, oh, I don't know. Do you know how long it took me to be able to express those 3 words to like partners of like, I don't know? It's like, oh, I do, but I just don't know right now. Okay, I'm gonna know real soon. I'm gonna have the answer shortly, but right now it was like, whoa, that's the shame in saying I don't know. You know.
Totally, man. Wow. That's just so well described. I think that I've seen more men who don't really believe that they're ready for it. And obviously every man has his journey and his timing. But in my opinion, the most valuable first step is witnessing other men go there. And this is where leadership really emerges, in my opinion, because for anybody to have the courage or confidence to go there and to jump off that cliff, there's got to be some leadership. There's got to be that modeling of, well, here's what it looks like, right? Here's what it looks like to explore your emotions. Here's what it looks like to create a relationship with anger, to know your anger, to know your sadness and your grief, to know your joy and your ecstasy. Here's what it looks like. And obviously the prerequisite for that is the willingness to step in the room, right? Yeah. So I agree with you there, but once you're in the room, there's an important role we play in mentoring each other and fathering each other, so that we can say, hey, here's what it looks like. Here's what it looks like to go there. Otherwise, I think it would be like the 1% of people who are willing to go there on their own just because they're naturally risk-taking. And they're like, what do I have to lose? But most men, and I know this, and I'm saying this to every man out there who's hearing this and feels really uncomfortable by this conversation just listening, is I know that the body is so clever and has so many different ways of telling us that we shouldn't do something. The mechanisms of the ego to protect us and try to keep us safe are so elaborate and strong. That's what we know as children. That's all we know, is to keep ourselves safe, to protect ourselves from perceptions of harm or actual harm. And there's a whole lot of story and narrative that says we shouldn't do what you and I have just been spending the last hour talking about. So I get it. I get why guys don't pick up the Embodied Man book off the bookshelf. I get why guys don't sign up for the courses. I also understand why women are reaching out to guys like you and me saying, how do I get my husband in this? How do I get my boyfriend? I just talked to somebody this weekend who was like, oh my God, I love your work. I wish I could get my partner to take one of your courses. I'm like, I know, I get it. And you're right, man. Everyone's got to have their journey. Everyone's got to have their journey. And when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of doing something different, that's when change will happen.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. I remember many years ago, I was running a weekend workshop in Australia with a woman friend of mine who works a lot with women. And on the weekend, we had the first day was all women, and the second day was all men. So Saturday came, and all the women came, and we were supporting them. It was kind of about like loving a man and how do they do it, and all the different ins and outs. And we had a beautiful ritual that night with the men. And then on Sunday, it was going to be a workshop with only the men. And I don't know if you spent much time in Australia. I was living down there a lot. Like, these are very like Ocker, out of the coal mines. Like, they were just very Aussie alpha dudes that really the only reason they were there was because their wife or their woman was like, hey, you're going to this weekend and you just need to come. So they were kind of like their arms are closed. They're like, all right, what's this all about? What's this dude gonna make me do? This is a little scary. And I led them into a meditation, this beautiful meditation. And within 15 to 20 minutes after that workshop started, every single man in that room was crying. Like, that wasn't my intention. I wasn't like, I'm going to make these guys cry. I was just, this is what naturally came through. And I looked at my friend I was teaching with, and it was just such a touching moment, because what it represented to me was that there was a willingness in these guys to show up, and there was a longing to be in a space where all of them were welcome, all of their emotions were welcome, and they weren't being judged, they were being celebrated for bringing the fullness of them. And that was like, I never forget that moment, because it was just a shift in how I was observing the male bodies. And no matter who the man is, underneath all of the masks and the layers, I find there's a longing inside to be vulnerable, to be real, to really share authentically, what's alive inside.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, man. I love talking about those real experiences I have, like testimonial types of experiences of things I've seen. Because what I like to say is that the ocean's not actually that deep. The armor's not that thick. All it requires is the right circumstances, environment, and then for one person to go 7 layers deep. As soon as that happens, and the container is held in a good way, all of a sudden everyone's got permission to go there. And as soon as we start seeing that we're not actually unique, that I'm not the only one who was sexually abused as a child, I'm not the only one who sexually abused or assaulted a woman, I'm not the only one who's afraid of my bigness or thinks about my dick size, or fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank of the story or inadequacy that men hold on to. As soon as we realize that we're not alone in that, and that we're not going to be ridiculed or bullied for it, it's like doing a cannonball, thinking you're jumping in the deep end and your ass hits the bottom, like right away. it's jarring, but it's also exhilarating. And you see guys walking out of there like grinning from ear to ear because, oh, I did it and I didn't die. It's a really exhilarating experience. But it takes courage, right? Your heart will be pounding out of your chest until you utter the words out of your mouth that you've never wanted to say to anybody in your whole life. You've been holding on to it for some guys, it's their whole life, since they were a child. And your heart will be like running out of your throat. And then the moment it comes out and you look around and realize that there's other guys in tears because they feel the same way. Or guys reaching out to put a hand on your shoulder, give you a hug, or raise their hand and say, dude, me too. It's amazing how transformative an experience like that is. And I've seen it happen in less than 15 minutes.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And the framework I like to put context to that I think helps support why that happens is really, again, into the conversation of inner union, because the feminine in the male body has more of a capacity to trust the masculine in a male body than she does to the masculine in a female body. So when it's all men that come together, the young girl inside, as I like to call it, often is like, I can just bring myself here and I'm not going to be ridiculed. Because usually, the dialogue, women are like, I want you to be more vulnerable and be more real. I want you to feel more. But then finally, that young girl that's inside the male body finally has the time when she's like, okay, I'm going to share more. And then what happens in that moment? It requires the female body to shift more to a masculine polarity, to witness without judgment. But if she's not witnessing without judgment and holding a strong masculine polarity, then then the young immature masculine in the female body is just going to start ridiculing that young girl inside. So what happens to the feminine inside the male body? She's like, I'm not coming out again. That was scary. You guys are crazy. I'm going to hide away in my little lock-in cave for another couple of years because this isn't safe.
Yes. Yeah, hide behind my big muscles and beard and never come out again.
Exactly.
That is so well spoken, and I hope that all of the women who listen to the podcast hear that too, because it's often a hard thing to communicate. I get a lot of inquiry from women who are asking exactly that. How do I get you seem like such an emotionally grounded man. How do I get I want my husband, my partner, my boyfriend to just open up more about what he's going through. And time again, I have to very gently and carefully explain why it doesn't feel safe as a man to do that with a woman, let alone our partners, right? And that, anyway, so I can't say it any better than you did, so I'm going to leave it right there. And if people missed it because they were snoozing while they were driving or something, go back like 5 minutes and re-listen to what Aaron just said. That's really powerful, man. That's really potent. And I do believe it's possible, but there's work that we all have to do to be able to really embody that space, to really embody a masculine space or a feminine space when it's appropriate and called upon, and to have the discernment and the listening for which is being asked for. To me, that's the real measure of adulthood. And to know when the time is right for those different abilities that we cultivate in ourselves. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, man, time flies when you're having fun and having good conversations. We're just about at time. So first thing I'll say, Aaron, is what a great way to get to know you, man. I really enjoyed this conversation and appreciate your depth of wisdom. It's really clear to me that you've embodied the wisdom that you share on this planet. It's really clear to me. I can feel that from you. And before I let you go and have you tell us a little more about what you're doing and tell us more about your book and your courses, I got a few rapid fire questions for you.
Yeah, sure. I love them.
So what is one thing you learned in your life that you wish you knew when you were 18?
Be more patient.
That's the book for all 18-year-olds, right? Forget the chapter. That's the whole book.
That's the whole book. Just be more patient. It will all work itself out. That little crazy mind that's trying to slow, take breath, relax. It's going to be okay.
And what do you think is the most important value to have as a man?
Presence. The capacity of just being fully in presence, no matter the situation, whether that's presence for yourself and your own process, whether that's presence for your partner, your family, like holding, loving, unconditional presence without to your own detriment. It's an embodied presence. It's not a mental presence. It's a presence that says, hey, I'm here. Can you feel me? I'm here and I'm with you completely.
I love that, man. Last one, what is the one thing the world needs more of from men right now?
Well, I would say embodiment. It needs a leadership that is coming from the embodiment inside, and that I feel is men who have a willingness to meet more of the uncomfortable, you could say, feminine emotions inside and feminine feelings. And in that, what will happen is leadership that comes from intuition. And when we can lead from that place and feel the intuition of our soul, then we're going to live into a whole new trajectory of possibility in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Love that, man. All right, well, where can people go to find you, follow you, learn more about your book? Tell us all the things before we let you go.
Yeah, so the retreat I'm running right now, I run usually 3-4 times in different places around the globe. You can go to the initiationjourney.com, has all the details. There's one coming up in Bali, and then Spain, and then again next year here in North America. And I have a book coming out just beginning of December. So depending on when you're watching this, you can go to Amazon and just look up The Embodied Man. You can also go to the embodiedmanbook.com, and there's a whole 10-week online course called the Embodied Man course. So you can go to those websites and get everything, and that will lead to my website and all the other things. I do a lot of retreats and workshops and one-to-one coaching and all the things. So find me. I'm very, very reachable. Say hello. If you have any questions, send me a question. I'm very passionate. This is my life work, and is, the reason why I can travel around like a madman and connect with epic communities and help people wake the fuck up.
There you go, man. Well, Aaron, it's truly been an honor to have you on here. Thank you for everything that you bring. Great. Good luck and enjoy this weekend with the men that you're bringing out there. And I look forward to catching up with you again further down the road.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you so much. Great to be here.